Got the stuff?
Yeah.
Let's see it. Radio.
It's not just the radio. It's what's on it. Listen.
You are not powerless.
Here it is.
You know, it irritates me when I hear the sense of powerlessness among the American people. What makes you think that you are any lesser than the shady politicians in Washington? You are more powerful than them. If you look at the Constitution, if you look at the Bill of Rights, or whatever, you are the bosses of them. They have no control over you unless you give them the power to have control over you. That's it. Be educated.
Officer 24, we had another encounter here. Someone tried to get their hands on a controlled substance.
What? Drugs? Alcohol?
Once
No.
you learn
Sense.
how things work.
Making trouble by making sense. Welcome to Making Sense with Rob Case. Good day, folks, and welcome to Making Sense with Rob Case. I am your host, Rob Case. This is our first radio broadcast, our first internet media outreach, I should say. And before we head into today's subject matter, I want to spend a little time telling you what we are about, what we are trying to achieve, a little bit of our history, and a little bit of our future goals. I have been interested in television, radio, movies, etc. for a long time. In the 1990s, I made some homemade feature movies, television shows, and comic books. In the late 90s and 2000s, my interest in film grew, and an interest in radio emerged. I love talk radio. I listened to it for years, called into talk radio programs, and even made my own at home, of which this is a product of. I went to school, worked for Open Road Radio, a motorcycle talk radio program featuring Gina Woods on WCKG-FM in Chicago. So, as you get yourself more acquainted with me in this program, I think that an interest will evolve as to the more deeper details of our rich history. At the moment, I don't necessarily see the value of having you sit through the entire history of a brand that you are just now getting acquainted with, as it normally, takes for a relationship to develop before any deep interest in anyone's particular past emerges. When people just meet each other, they don't go into sharing their life's histories with each other until after they've established a relationship with that person. So, in that spirit, I'm going to spare you our entire life history until you get to know us a little bit more. What you see on your screens as you listen to the audio of this program is the web address to the Making Sense message board. In 2004, I started it as a forum to talk about the things most interesting to me, and on issues of the day, in which it encourages debate, informs people, and retrieves insight from others whose dissenting opinions would either put my beliefs to the fire of detailed examination or allow me to recognize my errors and prompt me to set me straight. If my beliefs were put to the fire and prevailed, I would know that the positions I held were solid. If I was set straight, it was because truth that may have not otherwise been brought to my attention through the input of someone else encouraged me to open a new avenue of understanding that I felt necessary to pursue so as to build a substantial reputation of credibility to my readers and listeners who seek value in the advice and information that I give to them. My church, High Road Bible Church in Lockport, Illinois, has been a great encouragement. The leadership of Pastor Tim Ratliff and the leading members of High Road Bible Church have encouraged me to grow spiritually, use the gifts God has given me to teach others, and grow even more solid in my own faith. I thank the Lord for them, as He has given me the gift of their love, encouragement, and support. It is a small church, a very small church, but it has the biggest heart that I've seen in a church ever. Our goals here are simple. We like to inform people on how things work, introduce them to the function of basic things and how they can be helped or hurt. I can't stand ignorance, especially on matters that affect our livelihood. If there's one thing that bothers me, it is someone who is ignorant of how things work. When someone is ignorant, they are vulnerable and more likely to fall for propaganda. And the result is, I get cheated. You get cheated. We get cheated because the ill-informed and misinformed are canceling out the votes and dissent of the well-informed and knowledgeable. That really makes me angry, so one of my purposes is to fix that, or do my best trying. Another goal is to resurrect the context of our American history. I am a deep researcher. I tend to dig deep for the information that I discuss. Too many times I find that information critical to preserving our freedoms are purposely withheld or withdrawn from the school system, the news media, and even churches who feel politically threatened by telling the truth. I seek to reverse that. Another goal is to call things for what they are. Effective communication assists in achieving this goal. If someone can grasp truths that may be perceived as complicated and then transferred in a simple, easy-to-understand form, then the person doing the transferring is a good teacher. One of my goals is to be a good teacher. The last goal I'm going to talk about before I begin is exposing the nature of the human heart. People's attitudes never change, or they rarely change. I like to see more change in the human heart. The human heart only goes in one direction, and that direction has been taken far too much for far too long. The human heart has gone the same old route for millenniums, centuries, decades, years, months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, and seconds. The way of the heart is me, myself, and I, and harmful, destructive things have resulted from that. If any function is corrupted, it is usually a result of selfish ambition. Now, I'm not talking about self-interest, in the sense of survival needs. I'm talking about selfish ambition. And selfish ambition usually tries to feed one's power, one's ego, one's own pride. Usually those three attributes that I just mentioned usually aren't vital for survival, but usually vital if they want to seek control over somebody else. And hopefully, I'll be able to expose that and hopefully get you to understand that, so that when it comes your way, and when it comes your way and my way, I'll be able to prevent that. Hopefully that'll tide you over for the moment. When we come back, I want to discuss with you what I believe is one of the biggest challenges of our day, where our country is headed, and what I think can be done to try and prevent it from sinking into sunset. We'll be back in just a moment. In order to survive, thrive, and know your surroundings, one must acquire a sense of direction, order, and set of principles to follow. At the Making Sense message boards, we not only do all of those things, but we make it interesting. Visit makingsense.proboards27.com to see what the deal is. And don't forget to listen to Making Sense with Rob Case right here on this channel. Write it down and make it a priority. It's the dawn of a new era, and we want you to be making sense. Visit makingsense.proboards27.com today. Welcome back. This is Making Sense with your host, Rob Case. The purpose of this show is to educate and empower you, the individual. The freedom of the individual under God is the cornerstone of freedom, but we are told otherwise. The reason why we are told otherwise is agenda-driven. Its motive is to corrupt and transform us to be at war with God, who is the only source of freedom available, and in turn embrace government as the final authority for which to live our lives, as it writes, a new morality. Once you eliminate God, you eliminate liberty. And when you eliminate liberty, you invite the presence of a very stealth and controlling political entity who could care less about your well-being, but will, without hesitation, exploit it to empower himself. We are seeing this all across the country. At the time of this broadcast, liberal Democrats are in control of everything. Everything. The quote-unquote goodwill that liberalism promises America is not seen or by all means felt by a majority of Americans at this time. At this moment, fear is running the day. People are deathly afraid of losing their jobs, and for very good reason. When the economy was excellent, people compiled massive debt. And why not? When the economy was great, all people expected was for everything to get greater. And it did, until this set of Democrats took over in 2007. Now, the massive debt that many Americans have now serves as a trap for them, as uncertainty grows as to whether or not Americans are going to be able to keep their jobs and pay down their enormous debts. After the election of 2006, my dad and I forecasted that everything would go straight to hell once the Democrats took over. And why not? When you subtract from economic prosperity and subtract efficiency by putting in place ridiculous regulations and so forth, you will have very little, if not nothing, at the very end. Taxes consume wealth. Regulation consumes efficiency, depending on what regulations they are, of course. But taxes eat away earned wealth. Producers produce wealth, and taxation consumes wealth. My dad has an interesting and very accurate saying. He told me that your money is your freedom. If they can take away your money, they can take away your freedom. How right he is. More and more, government is intruding where it doesn't belong, and more it is requiring that you and me pay up. We are nothing more than cash cows to most of these politicians in Washington, with no other value other than what wealth we can produce for them. We can attempt to dethrone the impact of the only source of freedom when it comes to our holidays, but we will not dethrone the almighty dollar come the holy holiday of April 15th, Income Tax Day. It feels as though we live in a different world. If I were to share with you the history of America, it would feel very foreign. Some of you would be heavily interested. Some of you would be intrigued. Some of you would feel shock, and some of you would feel betrayed. Those of you who would feel betrayed would do so because the stuff I tell you, I guarantee you never heard in school. You would have had to do your own independent research to know what I would tell you. America's history seems so foreign to how things are run today, and there is ample reason for this. What has established freedom in America has now been reversed, and everything, as a result, is going backwards. In other words, America is completely corrupt to what it once was. Rather than the government answering to the people who elected them, the people, ignorant of their history, now have to answer to the government. Along the way, we Americans have also gotten spoiled rotten. When you have everything you could possibly want, without much struggle, you take what you have for granted. And when you take what you have for granted, your mind rots as it has no previous harsh experience to remind you that everything you have isn't a given. You have to earn it. Take, for example, the early days of the American experiment. Those in the Revolutionary War knew firsthand, by hard experience, that freedom was not a given. It had to be paid for with blood and maintained with a lot of alertness, stress, blood, sweat, and the fear of it all being taken away with a vengeance if they so much as let their guard down for one moment. If the founding fathers who participated in the revolution lost what they had accumulated, not only would they have been punished by the King of England, but the king would have had to make sure that such a rebellion like that could never again take place. Measures would have had to have been taken to prevent a future rebellion, and everything would have continued as it did up to this particular moment right now. The founders had to win at that point in history, or lose it all, risk losing it all forever. As a result, we would not have any of the things that we are so accustomed to having right now. Today, however, we find ourselves in a stranger situation. If America was invaded tomorrow, a takeover, I'd expect, would be relatively easy. This is kind of harsh, but I say that because it seems as though too many people, way too many, are ignorant of our history, too trusting of charismatic politicians, and are too brainwashed into thinking that America was founded on evil, that it is maintained by evil, and that its evil pollutes the rest of the world. And so the solution to people who think like this would be to act more like Europe. And then hopefully people would like us more. As this show progresses, I seek to do my part to eliminate this, and use this program as a tool to the best of my ability, restore our history, and with that, restore within us a new sense of pride and a drive to take it to a new level of happiness not felt in years. Let's restore our confidence. America has been a great country. It has liberated millions from tyranny. It has been a vital tool in the prosperity of the world, and it continues to be a beacon for freedom. The only thing right now standing in the way of America's God-given potential are secular humanists who seek to turn America into a mediocre socialist state. In politics, there are two ideologies. There is a prevailing truth, and then there is rebellion to that truth. A factor that has existed ever since the leading angel Lucifer led multitudes of angels to a war in heaven to rebel against God, and to take over his kingdom to elevate himself as absolute ruler. Since that event, the very same conflict remains. A lust for total control by force is in rebellion against freedom. Efforts to remove the moral element and the value of human life by eliminating God is at new disturbing levels, and government is doing all it can to stand in the way of your right to prosper by taking away, subtracting more of your money to enrich itself. When the people suffer most economically, the government prospers most. Force is what is required to guarantee a desired result. There are always modern equivalents to previous and ancient behaviors, and the elements remain today as they did at the beginning of America. If you read the Declaration of Independence, there are striking similarities between the complaints lodged against King George III and the concerns leveled against our current president, President Barack Obama. When we come back, I'm going to tell you about the situation we find ourselves in, and let's not see if we can come up with some solutions to try to combat this when we return. In order to survive, thrive, and know your surroundings, one must acquire a sense of direction, order, and set of principles to follow. At the Making Sense message boards, we not only do all of those things, but we make it interesting. Visit makingsense.proboards27.com to see what the deal is. And don't forget to listen to Making Sense with Rob Case right here on this channel. Write it down and make it a priority. It's the dawn of a new era, and we want you to be making sense. Visit makingsense.proboards27.com today. All right, we are back with Making Sense with Rob Case, and I want to spend a little time with you to share some solutions for which we can return America to a new level of greatness. I feel that the morale of the American people is sinking, and that we are headed to a point where it will get so bad that something will need to be done for the sake of our own sanity. Here is a little encouragement that I hope you will use to motivate you in your efforts as you join me in returning America to its greatness. Number 1, you are not powerless. You know, it irritates me when I hear the sense of powerlessness among the American people. What makes you think that you are any lesser than the shady politicians in Washington? You are more powerful than them. If you look at the Constitution, if you look at the Bill of Rights or whatever, you are the bosses of them. They have no control over you unless you give them the power to have control over you. That's it. That's done. That is truth. You are not powerless. They have to answer to you. Number 2, be educated. Learn the functions of how things work before you listen to your politicians square off in their next big debate. Once you learn how things work, and these things could be how your job works, how business works, how oil works, all these things. Once you learn how these things work, it will be easily revealed who is full of it and who is right on the money. If you fail to do this, you will end up being led astray to what sounds attractive to the ear. And when you follow what simply sounds good, you are liable to be punished by the consequences of your vote. We are seeing this at this very moment. Number 3, educate your friends and relatives. I believe that if you really love somebody or deeply care about somebody else's well-being, you will tell them what they need to hear rather than worry about what they want to hear. Too many times people tend to think that if they tell the truth, they are starting fights, starting conflicts. They're creating an awkwardness, an uneasiness. If people are sincere and they debate you, then that will prove that they care enough about the issues to engage in a debate with you. I don't know about you, but when people debate me, I actually admire the people who debate me because it shows me that that person is passionate enough to fight with me and to risk creating a sense of awkwardness so that the truth, so that we can get to the heart of the truth and that we can actually share our ideas together. I really, really do. I sincerely believe that. I really admire those who debate me. It's just the truth. Number 4, always remember that some people are irrational and cannot be told anything. Arrogant people lightly dismiss simple truths. Yet it is the simple truths that contribute most to having a strong and productive society. I see far too much that people can't seem to do the simplest of things anymore. Do you notice this? They do this because they lack the ability to think for themselves and think about what the right thing to do would be. I personally admire older people most because their survival depended on how well they could think. as well as depend on their faith. Dismissing things like common sense and absolute truths have contributed to the vegetative state we currently find ourselves in. Let's change that. Self-serving politicians do not want you to think. They want you to react. And they want you to react favorably to what they tell you. They want to be the commanders and you the obeyers. In fact, Adolf Hitler's rise to power was owed to people's failure to think for themselves. While allowing themselves to be mesmerized by his charismatic charm, Hitler once said, "What luck for rulers, that men do not think. Thinking is most discouraged by the most controlling." Remember that. I'm going to say it again. Thinking is most discouraged by the most controlling. When it comes to politicians, you are their bosses, and they are supposed to be held accountable to you. You, the voter, are then accountable to God and others who surround you. Number 5, always think of others before yourself. There is that one verse in the Bible that says to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, there is a mystery embedded within that Bible verse. When you think of yourself and only yourself, you close out anybody and everybody outside yourself. As you pursue the politician that you think would best serve your interests, while thinking, to hell with everybody else. Remember that your vote will be channeled. Your vote will be channeled to a candidate who will most likely do the very same thing that you did to others, to you. Once they get your vote, to hell with you. They will close out any thought of you as you did to your neighbor. You will have done unto yourself what you have done to your neighbor. It's kind of interesting, but it's true. Number 6, we need to live by strict absolutes and standards. Lawlessness is kind of rampant right now. People don't respect law, probably because laws have been made by politicians to line their pockets rather than consider the best interests of the people they are elected to represent in the first place. This has resulted in deep cynicism and distrust in anything that could actually be in place for our own good. Lawlessness does have its own set of consequences, so you have a choice. Either be punished by those appointed to enforce the laws, or be punished by natural consequence. Number 7. This, I think, is the most important one of all. Live as though you will be held accountable to God, because it is with Him you will be held accountable. When I read certain quotes from the Founding Fathers, a common truth jumps out at me like never before. Their various messages put together a common theme. If you do not fear the Lord and govern or vote without the fear of being held accountable, then I regret to say you will be in for a series of unpleasant surprises and many disappointments. Those with the greatest fear of being held accountable to God tend to treat and value other people with the consideration that they, like themselves, have a soul. Those who fail not to acknowledge the aspect of the soul, and in turn fail to acknowledge being held accountable to God or do not believe in God, tend to view other people as nothing more than animals who are beneath themselves. They tend to view other people as animals who are destined to fall at the control of someone else. This is extremely important, as this lays out a dynamic that has incredible impact. By lacking this trait, by lacking the knowledge or by lacking the consideration that you will be held accountable to God, if you do not have that, you will hold a greater contempt for those around you. You will hold a greater contempt for other people. By carrying this trait, that people under God have a soul and respect them with the same value that God would, you will hold a greater respect for those around you, even if they don't extend you the very same courtesy, because that would be, in and of itself, an act of grace, and that sends a message. When we come back, we will close out the first program. In order to survive, thrive, and know your surroundings, one must acquire a sense of direction, order, and set of principles to follow. At the Making Sense message boards, we not only do all of those things, but we make it interesting. Visit makingsense.proboards27.com to see what the deal is. And don't forget to listen to Making Sense with Rob Case right here on this channel. Write it down and make it a priority. It's the dawn of a new era, and we want you to be making sense. Visit makingsense.proboards27.com today. Well, folks, we're back. I just want to tell you, I just want to thank you for being a part of this, for being a part of this event, for this first show. And remember, please visit the website, because I am actually going to post the principles, the 7 principles that I talked to you about today. I'm going to actually post them on my website. So visit http://makingsense.proboards27.com. 27 is the number 2 and the number 7. So again, makingsense.proboards27.com. There is no www in that address. So type that in, you will be taken to the site, and there you will be able to find some of the highlights of this program. It was great to be with you today, and I can't wait until we meet again next time. So be on the lookout. Thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, I'm Rob Case, and you're listening to Making Sense. Good day.